unbelievable to think about. Like 57 million Americans have lost their jobs since the start of the pandemic. And I mean, I know I'm stating the obvious, but it's really horrible. And what's even more challenging is that when you're a job seeker, and Mark, you deal with this every day too,
Yeah.
it becomes a very isolating event. You get, especially if you're at a place like I am in New Jersey, where you're still under lockdown, you're stuck in your home, you can't go out, you're in between roles, and you just don't know what to do, and you feel alone. So I thought it'd be really super helpful to have a place where people could go and they could just, at the very least, commiserate, to vent, to commiserate, to get to get ideas, because think about it. It's so crazy. You can't go outside really for the most part. You can't go to temple, you can't go to church, you can't go to sporting events, you can't go to restaurants or bars. So you don't have that social interaction. And if you're in between jobs, as you know, you really need to get out and meet with people and get ideas. So this way you can get great leads to find a job.
Yes. And I kind of love the dynamic that we have in what we call our job lab, where people can hear, as I go through like a Q&A and try to get as many people help as much as possible. When you hear somebody else's ongoings and their challenges and even their successes, you get inspired, and you might be able to blueprint some of that for yourself and to customize it to where you can also make do of that particular strategy as well. So it is a great strategy. And yeah, there's so many job seekers that are out there that are out of work. The messages, the emails, constant. And I want to help as much as possible. And this is one of the ways that we do it. Also, I should mention that Jack is a Forbes senior contributor to careers on Forbes. So there's a lot of people that read his column. He is an incessant writer. I thought I didn't meet somebody who wrote more than I did, and you write a whole lot more than I do. People are wondering, and that's one of the things they're actually caught up in, is they're wondering, they hear the term reinvention or rebranding or all these different terms. What's the simplest way for you that you explain to job seekers that they, how to pivot and how to modify their job search to reach the market and the job market that they want to reach?
It's a good question. I think what happens is this, you have, I would say probably the majority of people who are looking for a job will say, hey, I'm an accountant. I've done XYZ in accounting. I'm looking for a new job, and I'm just looking to continue in that way. I'm going to look for a similar job, maybe get to a manager level or higher. But there's a large amount of people, particularly in this point in time, for various reasons, where they say, I don't want to stay being an accountant. But I'm finding out, and I think we chatted a little bit before the other day, that you see this too, that a lot of people in this COVID-19 pandemic are starting to reassess their lives. They're thinking, hey, I've been doing this thing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I don't know, do I still like it? Or maybe I don't like it anymore. Maybe I just was on this hamster wheel and never had time to sit back and really think, what am I doing with my life? And I mean, this is going to sound, kind of crass in a way, but when people are looking and they see the amount of cases of COVID-19, the amount of deaths, it starts making them reassess, like, hey, life is very short, it's fragile, it's precious. And what am I doing with it? So I saw this happen also after 9/11 and after the financial crisis, where people start reassessing, what do I do with my life? So there's a group that are saying, hey, I need to try, I just got to do something different. I have to find, another way to manage the rest of my career, whether you have 5 more years, 10 more years, 20 more years, whatever, but to really say, hey, I got to make a change. Then you just have people who, as I mentioned before, are just sick and tired of what they do. You do something for so long and you're like, all right, I can't do this any longer. This is just driving me crazy. What do I do? And then you have to start figuring out a way to, like you said, either pivot, have a plan B, reinvent yourself, however you want to call it. But it's really saying, hey, I have to do something different. I have to improve my life, improve my career, make a change, and just to make me happy and feel good about getting up in the morning.
Yeah, yeah, and to add to your point, I think a lot of people they get stuck in the growth mindset that they have to grow in a specific area, in a specific industry. That may be true, but sometimes you get disenchanted, if that's a
Yeah,
word in a sense, and therefore you may have to resign yourself to pivot. Some people do start over, and that's okay. Um, a lot of people they wait a long time after they've been miserable for a long time, and they run out of creativity, or it gets stifled, and they start to back off of those particular goals, and it doesn't have to be that way.
absolutely. It's interesting. You say do over. When I was a kid, I
Hmm.
grew up in this place called Canarsie City, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And what you would do, we would play pretty much any sport in the streets.
Hmm.
But it was crowded. It was a city. So you'd have cars coming and going and people pulling out of their driveways. And as we're in the middle, let's say we're playing football, in the middle of play, we'll have to call it a do-over because a car came in and stopped it. So it's like, stop what we're doing. Whatever happened before doesn't count anymore. It's over. Call
Right.
it do-over and start all over. And that's what it is. So I like how it brings back a memory. So that do-over is like really important, even when, so when you're an adult, to say, hey, all right, I've invested all this time and effort and energy into one area, but I don't want it anymore. And now you have to take a step back. And this is hard to do,
Right.
hard to do more. It's hard because the chances are you'll end up making a little less money.
Hmm.
You're wrapped up, your identity is wrapped up in your job and your career. All your family and friends are going to look at you and like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? But as you pointed out, like you get to a point where it's just enough is enough. You can't take it anymore.
Hmm.
And we've all seen that in people. Think about it. How often do you speak with a person, either professionally or personally, and they, you just, they emanate that anger, that unhappiness, that bitterness. Whereas if you meet somebody who really enjoys what they do and they're happy
Hmm.
about their job, it's such a different experience. You feel that. They walk into a room and the
Right.
mood is better, as opposed to that other person walks into the room and you have a weight, you feel uncomfortable, like they're bringing something along with them. And that's probably what you were saying when you reach that point where maybe you should have done this a long time ago,
Yeah.
and now it's just not working. And then what I find out too is that not only does it affect you, but it affects the people around you, affects your family, affects your coworkers, because they all
Hmm.
sense it. And then
Sure.
you end up doing poorly in your job because everyone can pick up on it.
Right. Right. And I get concerned a little bit at times because people they have such a different reaction uh, that they get to a certain point of their life, and they get discouraged that they have to start over, or they get discouraged that they have to pivot. And I can understand that. I've been there. But in this day and age, I think that there's a mind set shift that needs to happen too. That reinvention may have to take place a lot more often than their fathers and grandfathers and grandparents have in the past.
Yeah. And you're right. It does take time. I mean, could you take your skills, your talents, your
Hmm.
background, and then move it into something else? Yes. Could that happen quickly? Yeah. But I'm
Right.
a big believer in manage expectations and plan. Not that everything will work like that right away, but
Right.
plan whatever you do that there are going to be a lot of obstacles, hurdles, jumping over walls.
Hmm.
It's not. I like the plan that it's going to be hard, because then if you do it and it's easy, you're like, oh, all right, this is great. But if you
Right.
think it's easy and then you run into these roadblocks, it's going to be hard for you to continue. So it is going to be a challenge. It's not so easy because it does entail a lot of times maybe taking a step back.
Hmm.
Maybe you have to go back to college or go to college and get a different degree, get certifications, get some licenses, learn something new. You may be at a senior level role and you have to put
Hmm.
your ego aside and say, all
Yeah.
right, I got to start over, which for a lot of people, that's rough to do. That's tough to put
That
that aside,
that is
and
absolutely
now all
rough
of a
to
sudden
do.
you're the low person on the totem pole. and before you were the, you were the senior person.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to remind me, even if it's just a couple of people watching the show, whether it's 1, 2, 10, I haven't seen the numbers, but share the show, share what's going on here, especially someone you feel free to tag people you know, and feel free to put in questions in the thread so that we can answer them even while we're on online here, as we're beginning to talk more about reinvention and reinventing your career, because this is not going to be the first economic downturn, and it hasn't been, but it's just it caught everybody by surprise of how this is manifested, and has been like a slow avalanche in a lot of ways, because in some ways it's gotten better, then it gets 10 times worse. So the news just keeps going on and on. And I know that you wrote an article recently about sustaining a positive attitude. Maybe there's a couple of things that you've gotten from our joint discussion on LinkedIn, and of course, maybe some from the article that you offered, or how people can really reshift and gain a more positive attitude.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest issues.
Mm-hmm.
Both people who are in between roles and people who, are still working,
Mm-hmm.
is how do you have a mindset that gets you through it?
Mm-hmm.
Because let's be honest, it's rough. And for
Yes.
some people, it's rough for everybody, but it's certain people are even tougher. I mean, you may have a family member who has COVID. You may have both, parents who aren't working. You may be a single parent and you have 3 young kids, and you have to kind of juggle your job and self-educating all the kids because maybe they're not in school.
Right.
So you're talking about real problems. You're talking about, what do the statistics say, that a vast majority of Americans don't have 3 months of emergency funds. So then they're worried, oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to get evicted from my apartment? Can I not pay my mortgage? Can I not pay my kids' tuition? So when you pile these on, it's not easy to just get up every day and not just hide under the blankets and,
Right.
and, and hope it goes away. So yeah, so I'm a big proponent is that when you're going through this, you have to pay attention to your health, your mental health, your emotional health, your physical
Mm-hmm.
health. And because we don't have that, you don't focus on that, it's easy to spiral downwards. It's easy to get really negative, especially if you're looking for a job. You fill out these long, glitchy applications, you don't hear back, they disappear into the hole, of these, corporate, ATS systems. You send out resumes, nothing happens. Maybe you
Right.
get an interview, you get ghosted. So it's so easy. It's so easy to get dejected, to get depressed, to get stressed. So it's almost like you have to sit down and put a plan together and say, hey, either this is happening to me or this could happen to me. So let me figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a consequence of a whole bunch of little things, Mark. It's like,
Yeah.
instead of focusing on all the negatives, you try to think of everything positive. Like, for instance, you talked about the We Meetup group we just started. Is that if somebody has like a phone interview, it's great. That's a victory.
Right.
Maybe you'll get it, maybe not, but yes, that's fantastic. If they made a good connection that could give them a lead to a job, great. So every step of the way that you look, and you want to collect all those positives so that you're not just dwelling on all the bad stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, you have to make sure that you're just keeping yourself in the game. So you don't want to be sitting on the couch all day, binge watching Netflix, eating potato chips, not what I mean? You're drinking too much, because then instead of getting stronger, you're just wearing yourself down. And
Right.
it's unfortunate, because I think in our society, we don't like talking about these things too much. We always want to talk about, like, say, hey, Mark, how are you doing? And you're like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing great. Jack, how are you doing? I'm doing great. And
Yeah.
you don't want to discuss the real issues that we have to cope with.
Yeah. And I think it should be okay to discuss the challenges that you're going through, and just with a regular person. I think what begins, our culture has changed more from
Mm-hmm.
um, having conversations to having a lot of hot takes. Instead of a little bit more empathy, there's more, well, automatically, I have a solution for you. instead of just saying, how do you feel? How did you feel when you got turned down? How did you feel making it all the way to the last round and didn't get the offer? I mean, those things are really real, and quite frankly, that hurts a whole lot more. I mean, you think about how, like for instance, Ben Johnson, who went all the way, I think it was he went to the South Pole first and didn't quite make it and came back with all these injuries, and I believe one of his crew members, all the teeth were lost from all the chattering because it was so cold. It was near death. And sometimes it could kind of feel that way when you get all the way to the end and you can't cross the finish line. But that's job search, just
You
like
know,
it is
that's a
anything
really
else.
good thing. In fact, I was taking notes while you were talking. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal that hot takes thing. I like that concept where, so it sounds like what you're saying is this. I'm really curious about this. So it sounds like what you're saying is, as a culture, whether it's online or just in person, it's more about, just a quick answer, quick solution, and not really dig a little deeper to find out how that.
Yeah, and I noticed that in a lot of conversations where people will give their hot take, but it's sometimes to get to their problem, or to get to where they're at instead of listening and trying to help
Right.
the other person. And that's probably the difference between real friends and people
Right.
who are just associated with you. But but a lot of people have that short leash for people who lose jobs, like it's their fault. And we
Yeah.
should know by now, in most cases, probably I can't put a percentage on it, but it's not the person who lost the
Yeah.
job. It's particularly their fault.
It's interesting. It's interesting to say that because, I was speaking to uh, a job seeker, and that's exactly what happened to her. Is
Hmm.
that rather than getting support, I was blown away by this, and maybe I shouldn't, but what she was saying is that rather than getting support from her family and friends,
Hmm.
is like kind of victim blaming. They're
Right.
making it like it was her fault. And I was incredulous. I'm like, wait, how, like, are they living under a rock? Don't they realize how tough this market is? How can you not be sensitive or try to help? But
Right.
I guess that's a thing.
Yeah, that's a real thing, and I think when we don't, you and I do that because that's something that we've
Yeah.
learned through listening and hearing 1,000 job seekers, and it's not always possible to give somebody 100% empathy as far
Yeah.
as time, but we definitely can give them that moment to express themselves and to kind of air out the dirty laundry for a moment. They can't stay there. I'm not suggesting at all that somebody let somebody wallow in pity, but
Yeah.
there comes a time when the other person needs to know
Yeah.
and have that. We use the term emotional intelligence to be able to say, "Hey, this person's hurting. Let me see if there's something else I can do." And sometimes it just takes a minute.
Yeah. Do you think also would be helpful, or is it also hurtful? I've noticed the trend with
Hmm.
interviewing that there's so much technology in the way. It used to be when I started recruiting, I've been
Hmm.
doing it 20 plus years, the average, age of a person who is an internal HR person, talent acquisition, I
Hmm.
don't know, 30 something to 50 something.
Hmm.
Now they've from what I've seen, they've let go a lot of the senior people over the years and replaced
Right.
them with very young people. Now,
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that. As you saw, my son came in here before fixing it up because I'm an idiot and I couldn't figure all this stuff out. So young people are brilliant, but sometimes if you don't have the experience,
Right.
it's tough. So then when you go, because what I hear from job seekers all the time is they'll go, a bunch of interviews, they think they do well, don't hear anything, and that really wrecks them because you don't get that, feedback of, oh, hey, Mark, you did really well doing A, B, and C. But
Hmm.
no, the manager said you really didn't do X, Y. So you really performed well. So if you interview again, those were fantastic. It just so happens those things you didn't have the background. That's what we need, and we have someone else. And
Right.
then you could walk away feeling, oh, I get it. And this is kind of what you were mentioning, that you get more of an in-depth information about how you can improve, how can you make yourself better, and then why you didn't get it. But it's almost like people walk around wounded because they think they did a great job. They don't want to
Mhm.
hear anything. And then they think it's them.
Right.
And then when they go for the next interview, it's so much harder because they're carrying that weight. Like, all right, I didn't get it last time, and I'm not going to get too many interviews. So I'm really stressed that I don't know when I'm going to get my next one. I got to do it. But you never even got feedback. So you don't even know what you did right or wrong.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that feedback is pretty essential, because sometimes people need maybe just a little bit of
Yeah.
validation, that and to feel like them hurting at that moment is okay, and that it's okay to let someone know, and it's okay um, to to
Right.
be engaged, and to share that. And that's why these groups are great in that sense,
Yeah.
because you get to hear other people. You get to, even people don't say it, you can hear it in their voice, and you can hear it
Yeah.
in their countenance.
Do you
uh,
think, do you think it
Go
could
ahead.
change back, Mark? Do you think maybe I'm wishful thinking, I'm completely naive,
Uh-huh.
that maybe one of the consequences from this, people will change back to that and have more of the dialogues like you and I are having here, you know, and give, and like when it comes to job seekers, give feedback and, maybe be more empathetic about the whole process,
Right.
or it's too late.
Yeah, no, I think it's easier to go back. I think
Yeah.
people decide, more people to decide, because there are people who've already decided they're going to be more encouraging, and naturally is great if others can find those folks and help them to survive this downturn in this hostile job market the way it is, because it may get worse. We don't know for sure, but it may become even worse than it actually is.
What do you think? What's your take on that?
My take is that for us to get back to where we are, um, unfortunately, we can't control the market. We can control our own actions.
Mhm.
Um, I think job search is a lifestyle. It's something that you're going to have to stay plugged into from now on. Um, and I've been saying this for a long time now, that you can't take it on and take it off like a coat.
Yeah.
It won't be, um, you can't be sad. You could be satisfied that dinner was enough, but that satisfaction's not going to last you till the for the next 2 days. Maybe if you decide to fast, that's okay, but you're going to be hungry again, and you're going to be put in a situation where you're going to need to refill those needs. And you just need to keep on, like, the networking, the professional development, keep those things as part of your life, and not just something you do when you anticipate a crisis. Then you might be able to uh, um, navigate the job search market a little bit better.
It's so different than it used to be, right? Like in my parents' generation, my dad was a teacher for like, I don't know, 40 years plus.
Mhm.
And that's what people did. You had that one job, that one kind of career.
Right.
I mean, and then he moved up, like became assistant principal, things like that, but really stayed the same thing. Now you're right. It's the average person, I don't know, maybe they'll have 5 careers.
Hmm.
Gen Z and millennials probably have 10 different careers, or 10 different jobs within those careers. So I think you're right. It's like you have to, moving forward, and this kind of goes into the whole pivot, reinventing yourself, is
Hmm.
that I guess the old ways are kind of done with for now, where, all right, you find a job, you find a career, you spend X amount of years, you get the golden watch, a handshake, some pension, and you're done. You go down to Florida. Now, who knows if you could ever retire?
Right.
Who knows if people could pay off their college loans? And then who knows what the next, it seems every 10 years we get something that just, rocks the whole economy and job market. So that, I guess to your point, you almost have to always be vigilant, right? You always have to kind of keep looking and being prepared and networking, because
Hmm.
you don't know when that next, whether it was the 9/11, the financial crisis, the great, the Great Recession,
Hmm.
this. it seems that there's going to be always something that could just knock you off your heels, and that if you just get complacent, it's going to be really rough.
Yeah, the complacency can really it stifles you any progress that you're going to be able to, because most people, it takes them a month or two to get revved up after you've worked a job and you've kept your head down for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It just does.
Yeah.
And because they weren't made to do some career development through the job, they think it's not necessary. That's not true. The market has changed. Every time you exit a job after even a year and a half, 2 years, you're light years behind. You're somebody else got a running start, and that's just you've got to be willing to compete and keep up with trends and keep up with development and keep up with what the market's doing and staying involved in, if not a job club, the industry organization or association, something that where you hear the news and you can even hear jobs that are opening up before they're even posted. And a network can do the same thing. And someone, you keep in touch with people and you're interested in their jobs, it takes a simple email for you to say, to start applying for that job. But you've just got to be ready in time enough, because there are people who stay ready and are constantly on the move now. So being static in the job search doesn't do a lot of good.
That's so smart. I don't know if you noticed, I was writing down again. I was about always be prepared. So when you said earlier about like why I write a lot,
Yeah.
I always have my antenna up for different ideas.
Yeah,
So whenever I hear
exactly.
it, I'm like, either I take a note,
Yeah.
in the old fashioned kind of book, or I
Yeah.
put it on my phone. So yeah, because like, you're right. The thing is this, we all we don't want to always think, oh, something bad is going to happen. So we just
Hmm.
block it out of our mind.
Right.
You're probably better off living your life. This sounds crazy, but you're living your life worried for that next, that next pandemic, that next crisis, so that you don't get complacent. So even though you have, let's say right now, you have a good job, you feel relatively safe, you feel really comfortable. Well, maybe from like what you're saying, Mark, hey, act as if tomorrow could be all gone. So
Yeah.
just prepare. And what that means is like networking,
Hmm.
kind of building up those alliances, maybe and this also goes back to the reinvent and pivoting. So rather than waiting for disaster to strike and you have to move, start slowly planning. Because let's say
Hmm.
you want to do something entrepreneurial for your plan
Right.
B or your reinvent. You don't want to
Hmm.
wait till, you have to do it. Maybe you do it, you get home from work and you allocate a couple of hours towards whatever kind of business you're going to start. On weekends, you put some time, and then you do that over a period of time. And then if something happens, you're ready to go. It's like you push the
Right.
button and I'm good. Or you go back to school, get some certifications, some degrees, so that once again, if something happens, you're ready and you don't have to do it. Also, I think what's hard if you want to pivot or reinvent yourself is just the dollars and cents. Because
Yes.
a lot of times, I can't tell you how many times as a recruiter, I speak with somebody and they say, hey, I'll be open to compensation. And then when it really gets into the details of it, you realize they can't be that open,
Right.
because their their expenses are such, they need a certain amount. So they're kind of locked in. So then it becomes
Hmm.
hard to do that. So if you start preparing, and you know how it is, time goes so quickly.
Right.
It's crazy. It goes so fast, so that if you start, let's say now, and you put away money and you make sure you put away, so that if you do have a time where you're like, I can't take my job anymore, I want to move and do something else, but I'm going to take less money. You can then say, well, you know what? I can afford to, because I
Yeah.
have this money that I put away for a rainy day. And so instead of taking that extra vacation or buying that new car or whatever, I put it away to invest in myself. So if I ever want to do something differently, I'm not held prisoner, because I
Right.
just don't, I can't do it, because I just financially can't do it. And now you're stuck. So I like that advice. That's a good piece. Like, always be prepared. And what was
Yeah.
that thing you said about the jacket? Wait, can you tell me that again? That was kind of
Yeah.
cool.
People put on the job search like a coat. They
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
take it off when it's When they get inside and they feel secure and they feel warm, they take it
Yeah.
off. When it's time to go back out in cold, they put it on. And uh, that's proverbial time wasted in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. You've got to be able to adjust to the weather and be able to
It's
do it
good.
seamlessly. Uh,
It's the same thing with it's the same thing like with interviewing and everything. If like you
yeah,
have an interview, let's say you with a job and you've been there for 10 years and you didn't go on any interviews or even informal interviews, then you start interviewing. It's a shocker. You know,
yeah,
it's really rough. But if you went on, even if you weren't just to go on some interviews, to get the practice, to see what
mhm.
it's like, you just keep sharp, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. And I had a mentor back in the day. She interviewed once a year to stay on top.
Yeah.
I think that was, and as old school as that sounds, I think that is good advice for today. I think today, from now on, you're gonna, because the trends change. I mean, can you imagine the person that worked 10 years, got laid off in this pandemic, and found out that their first interview is going to be a video interview,
Right. Right.
or even be
Yeah.
insulted? That's a phone interview.
Yeah.
And then the second interview is not going to be with the person. Oh, we would like you to take this behavioral assessment, and they'll go, what is a behavioral assessment? And that's happened a lot between
Yeah.
February and now, that
Yeah.
people are stuck in that way.
I think you know what it's baked into us. We don't want to look at these things. You know, it's like I'll hear people who are like insurance people, and people don't want to get insurance because they don't want to hear that they're going to get sick or die. So
Right,
they just want to block it out. You know,
right.
or they won't write a will because they're like, oh no, that's not going to be me. I'm going to be the person who lives forever. But it's
Mhm.
almost like we avoid those topics, and when
Yeah,
you avoid those topics, you're not prepared for it. So yeah, it's like going for a job is as important as any of those things because in fact arguably it's the most important thing because you need that job for your livelihood to have food on the table, roof over your head.
right. And as far as strategies are concerned, I mean, there's a lot of strategies people can do. I mean, really, ultimately, I don't see anything wrong with the person that reads our advice. And
Mhm.
I, I think we write pretty modern, up to date. This is how you do it in today, August 21st, uh, 2020. This is how you do it. But I don't have any problem either with the person saying, I'm gonna sit down and call 50 people I know, and ask them, do they know people who are connected to my industry, and all that. In fact, to a great degree, that's a great idea. Or the old fashioned, I'm going to look in the phone book, maybe not a literal phone book,
Right.
but maybe their LinkedIn connections. I'm going to everybody, all the who are executive positions in my industry, I'm going to call them all, and maybe they might be the one that gets them connected. Um, it's better to do it like if you have 5 a week in anticipation that there might be an industry change, but doing it all at one time, that's not the worst idea in the world because it's doing something.
Yeah.
I'd rather do that than to fill out a bunch of applications online with no way to follow up on them.
Also, you know, it's so much, if you have a job, it's so much easier to do those things
Yeah.
than when you don't, or you're scared you're losing your job because then it's different. Like if you have a job or yeah, maybe a little, you're okay. You could
Hmm.
reach out and do the things you mentioned. Hey, I'm going to call up Jack and see if he knows anybody who could help me out and has a role and so on. You can have more casual, comfortable conversations.
Hmm.
But then when you lost it, or you're seeing you're looking around your office and everyone's losing their jobs, you don't come across the same.
Right.
You come across, a little bit more desperate, a little more afraid, a little bit more,
Yeah.
awkward. So you're right. It's like you're way better off
It's
starting these
damaging.
things before.
Yeah, Jack, it's damaging. Well, it's damaging perception of how the employer sees you, as much as anybody else.
Hmm.
Because, for all these years, and I remember back in from the last recession, that, the word got out that employers weren't hiring anybody who wasn't previously employed at that particular time. Now, for a lot of employers, they still hold that to
Isn't
this
that
day,
wild? Is
some
that
20
it's
years from now.
I can't, some things I can kind of understand. Other things is like, why are you going to blame the person? I've definitely had people tell me, hiring managers and HR, well, Mark was in between roles. I rather, and it, and they sound so arrogant when they say this. I'd rather have the person who didn't get laid off, not the person who did. And you're like, really? Really?
Yeah.
Is it that easy? Are you? Yeah. They looked and said, "Hey, this person's the worst. I'm letting go." There are no other issues. No other reasons. Maybe just because of X, Y, and Z.
Right. And it could possibly that is the person that was key in finishing the job. Because in many cases, once you finish a job, the job is done. There's no expanding out. There's no other roles or no other department for you to go
Mhm.
to because you had that quality that they needed for that time. You got it done. And that was more of an
Yeah.
accomplishment, not particularly something negative against them, because none of us can hold back. Our success isn't based on whether you're laid off, and sometimes even whether you're fired or not. That sometimes that's just part of the game because you either finish your job or that job won't have any more work as far as the way the vision of the company. So you end up in that particular situation.
Yeah. So sometimes you almost feel that companies look for excuses not to hire you than to hire
Right,
you. Like
right,
they're always looking and they're trying to find something that they can say, nah, okay,
right. Yeah,
just so they don't have to
absolutely.
make that decision.
Yeah, more excluded, film excluding people at first,
Yeah.
not particularly to see how each could fit in. But I could understand that from the employer's position as well. They have so much time, and really, people who vet, they're rarely skilled in interviewing, and a lot of them are just as afraid to interview than the candidate themselves. So it's not a process that they particularly want to go through, and they want to see how to make it. They want to know how they can truncate the particular uh, the process, and that's one way of doing
Yeah.
it. Is uh, the loose fruit, which fruit is already on the ground. We can exclude that one and look for the more fresher fruit.
See, it's interesting because like that's one of the trends I noticed that I think really gums up the works for
Hmm.
interviewing is that the old fashioned, and it shouldn't be old fashioned, picking up the phone and having a conversation with,
Hmm.
a candidate and having that back and forth.
Right,
And somehow, maybe because all you do is get robocalls now, so people are just sick of picking up the phone.
right,
They don't want to pick
right.
it up because they think it's just, like whatever, spammy kind of thing, and they're sick of it. Or like when we were younger, I imagine you went through the same thing, right?
Hmm.
Let's say I'm calling you up and I want to, young Jackie is calling up Marky to say, hey, let's play. And then your mom or dad gets on the phone and they're like, hey, Jackie, so how's your parents? How are they doing? And I'd have to say, oh, they're doing okay. Blah, blah, blah. And they go,
Right.
oh, how's your brother, Alan? I'm like, oh, my brother's now. And then you're like forced to
Yes.
know how to, be on a phone call and do it.
Yeah.
Now, like my kids, dude, it's the funniest thing if like we still have a landline in the house, if it
Mhm.
rings, they look at it like it's like, ew, what is that? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
It's
That's
so
how I react because we have a landline too. My wife, all the calls are for her because I've trained everybody to call my cell phone or to
yeah.
text me. And but I'm still paying for the landline.
I'm still a holdout for it. I don't know why, but there is maybe, but yeah, if I think if you would have that, it would make it so much easier for both sides
Yeah.
because then, someone from the company and the job seeker could have a conversation. They could understand each other. They
Hmm.
could, pass on some information why maybe they didn't interview as well, what they can do to improve it,
Hmm.
or just a little bit closure.
Yeah.
You get it for this, and like you could agree or disagree, but at least you're like, okay, I get why they said it, and
Right.
there's some piece to that. But otherwise, people are walking around all like they just don't know, and I think that really hurts people mentally and emotionally. Like, why didn't I get it? What happened? Is it me? Did I do something bad? Is there a
Right.
black cloud over my head? Did somebody say something negative about me? Like,
Right.
and it's yeah. So it's like I think, and this goes to your whole point about empathy and not just giving a hot take, but just really digging. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Getting
Yeah.
into it.
Yes. Absolutely. And at this particular point, I was hoping we have more questions, and maybe people left. Again, if you're watching and you got a question, feel free to ask. I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of very actionable tips from Jack. A couple of things, maybe even if you didn't suggest in the particular article that we based our
Sure.
discussion on, uh, what would you say would be the two things that when it comes to reinventing? Um, and the way I look at it is, so don't look at it as a big to do. It's more of a pivot and a mindset than it is, you've got to go change clothes. you know, in some cases you do. But what would be a couple of tips that you say that you've seen, heard that are working right now?
Yeah, it's funny that you say about don't look at such a big thing, because I find it's, if you do that and you make your goal so grand and audacious,
Hmm.
it just freaks you out. I try to look at things and break it down into little pieces, because then you could do a little piece,
Yes.
succeed, go to the next, and then eventually you hit what you want. So you
Hmm.
have you have the systems in place to achieve it. So I would almost look at a Venn diagram, right? You know how you have those concentric circles, and
Sure.
you look at, okay, what are my skills? What am I good at? What do I like doing? You know, what would make me happy? What gives me some meaning and purpose? But then
Hmm.
also, you got to, the reality is, can I make a living doing this? Because if you have a passion for it and you're excited about it, but it doesn't pay the bills, you're quickly not going to be excited about it. You're quickly, all of a sudden, you're going to say, I hate this too. So
Right.
I would first kind of do an assessment on yourself. How do I, like, yeah, well, those things, what I want to do, what I'm capable of doing, can I succeed at this? Can I make a living at this? And
Hmm.
if they all work and that comes into the center of those, circles, then
Hmm.
okay, you're in the right direction.
Yeah.
Then once you do that, then you have to say, okay, what type of career, what type of job, what type of sector, and then what do I need in addition to my soft skills, my interests, what have you? Do I need to take a license for it? Do I need to get some coursework? So you have to figure that out, and then
Mm.
you start going towards it. And what I would also suggest, another thing to do, is to reach out, and this is hard for people to do.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I know where
Being
you're
a
going.
recruiter for so many years, I feel comfortable just cold calling anybody, which is,
Hmm.
it's I'm used to it, and I'm used to the rejection that, if people don't want to help. But you could reach out and find people in that space who are doing it, and just be very transparent and say, hey, I've been doing such and such for the last 5, 10 years, but I really have my heart set on doing, kind of what you're doing. What do you
Hmm.
think? How is the industry? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it hot? Is it cold? Do you think I can cross over? Are there jobs? Are there opportunities? And you can't just do it with one person, because that one person may say, no, don't do it, and they discourage you. You
Hmm.
have to do it with enough. I find out, Mark, that if you speak to enough people, you start to get the real deal. Because
Yeah.
if you talk to, like, say, 10 people about going into a different, type of job, different kind of career, maybe two or three, like, great idea, two or three, oh, that's the dumbest idea ever, don't do it. So if you spoke to those two, you'll be crestfallen and won't do it. And you
Right.
those two, your hopes will be too high. But then the
Mm.
rest will give you a mixed, and then you get the real, like, okay, this is what the reality is. And then you can make a decision. Okay, based on what they're saying, maybe I could earn a certain amount of money. I could live with that. And I
Mhm.
do really like this area, and I think I'll enjoy it. And then I always find out with people I've seen over the years, and this is something really cool to watch. I've
Mhm.
definitely found out over the years, if people like what they do, somehow they find a way to succeed.
Yes, I
Almost
agree.
all the time,
I agree.
right? Almost
I
all the
totally agree.
time. It's even if they start really low and whatever, but if they have that, they have that drive, that desire, but a genuine one. They really enjoy it. They like what they do,
Mhm.
because I think it emanates to other people, and people pick up on it, and then they want to hire that person. They want to give that person a raise. They want to give that person
Sure.
more responsibilities. So if it all works, even if you have to step backwards, like we said earlier in the conversation, put your ego aside and just say, hey, I'm going to run with it. I'm going to do everything it takes to move forward.
Right. Right. And I think that's where we can go in 12 different directions, that particular advice, because I think there is, when people have said in the, 10, 12 years ago, follow your passion. And
Mhm.
there's some validity to it. Some of it's like has been fantasized about, But I think one thing for sure is that if you can tirelessly learn about your craft or the things you really want to do, you will find a way. And I'm not even talking about even making the product and all of that, but if you can tirelessly learn and then that translates to whatever else that you do, then I think you've got something. It's just a matter of what you want to do and where you want to do it, which is it goes back to the first
Yeah.
things you said is, and that's where most people have a hard time starting. You know what I mean? When they're starting over, they don't think in terms. They say, I just want a job. Well, just a job is not it's not a realistic goal. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Not a not one that satisfies you, because
Yeah.
and people will grind out that kind of job for years. I know because I've done it. So I definitely understand that, and those are great tips. And I would think that people can start with uh, uh, something small and claim it as a victory. Don't look at it as, oh, I've got 99 more steps to go. That may be true, but the more time you're thinking about how far you have to go, it becomes that much harder to take the next step.
You're so
So,
right. It's all right.
so
It's right. Because then you just do that little step and then you can feel good about yourself. You do another little step. But I think unfortunately most people just look, oh, I'm all the way down here and I should be all the way up here.
right,
And it's just hard to do anything because you want to be up here like right away. And it just doesn't
right.
work that way.
Yeah, no, it sure doesn't. Jack, I exhausted your time today,
This went
which is
quickly, huh?
fantastic. Oh yeah, I know that was it, and we talked for a long time yesterday,
Yeah.
so a lot of great stuff. Thank you so much.
Oh,
People,
my pleasure. I really appreciate you inviting me on. This was great. And you had some really great ideas and thoughts and suggestions, advice. And
yeah.
I'm taking notes on that.
Well, if you really want to know the truth, I kind of scouted you for like 9 months before I actually reached out to you.
You stalking me, huh? Uh,
The old-fashioned stuff, and people listen to podcasts
yeah.
and know that people will pitch me all day, and I don't pay attention to them for as far as guests. But there's like 2 dozen other people I'm kind of watching, and I kind of gotta, it's okay. I need that content. I need that content.
Right.
That's who I reach out to.
Well, I appreciate
So
it.
I appreciate that you responded, and this has been a great show.
Well, this is great.
Um, um, for some reasons, I thought we were going to have a few more questions than we did, but we don't. So, but I am going to put up samples of little excerpts of our discussion starting today, so people can start getting some benefit of it. It's also going to
Excellent.
be uploaded to YouTube. It's going to be on a podcast coming in fall, so people will have plenty of opportunities to listen. They want to know how to get in touch with you and what you do. Where should they go and what should they do?
Okay. Should I give you that now or are you going to put
Yeah,
it
go
up?
ahead, give it to me now.
So I guess the easiest thing is they could find me on recruiter.com, WECRUITR.com. You could also see me on LinkedIn. I'm active, probably too active on there, driving people crazy. So you can easily find me there. Facebook, not as much. I put my articles on there, but that's about it. And Twitter,
Right,
not as much active. So yeah, maybe hit me up on Recruiter. Definitely join the We Meet Up Facebook group. That'd be cool. Join up Recruiter. And
right.
I'm always available. It sounds like you're the same way, that
Yeah.
if someone has, wants to bounce something off, they're going on an interview and they just need a sounding board or
Yep.
something happened to them and they like, all right, what the heck does this mean? Why did this happen? How do I
Hmm.
interpret it? So yeah, I'm always open, and you'll see like on LinkedIn, I'll put my phone number there. So if people want to call,
Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was pretty interesting. I
yeah.
said, wow, that's bold.
Well, because
But
you know what it is, I find out. I know we're wrapping up, but I find out like it goes back to this. When they reach out, you can really get a better sense of
that's
what's
true.
going on, and you can give
Yes.
a better answer. Because sometimes if someone just writes a question out to you and you don't have all the facts, I feel like reluctant because if I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, I don't really want to say something because I could probably giving really bad advice. But then once you start hearing them talk through it, like, okay, now I kind of get what it is. So I feel more
Mhm.
comfortable giving you, the best answer I could. So
Right. Right. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Well,
Going to
thanks.
be replaying this one over and over again. Thank the rest of you who joined us live or through the podcast. Hopefully, you have a great weekend. And I have my job lab tomorrow,
Awesome.
and basically it's been exclusive to my email list. So if you want to get on the job lab tomorrow, get on the email list. And follow the instruction there, then you'll be able to get on the job lab call tomorrow here on Zoom.
Okay,
In the
I'm on it, Mark.
meantime,
I'm going to get on it. All right. Well,
well,
thanks so much.
thank you very much,
Thank
and
you.
you all have a good day.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.